Welcome to For the Love of Books, a podcast by North Lanarkshire Libraries. Hi everyone, welcome back to the North Lanarkshire Libraries podcast For the Love of Books. My name is Chris Wilson, the E-Services Librarian, and today I am joined by Alison Walsh, the Customer Services Librarian for the Coatbridge area, and Hilary, the Open Learning Officer for the Motherwell area. Hello guys, welcome to the podcast.
Hello.
Hi there.
And you guys are not newbies to this. You've been on the podcast before, so you know what you have got yourselves in for joining me today, which is good. The topic that we're going to have a wee chat about is surviving another lockdown and having a bit of a hopeful future. So we're going to have a wee look back at the last few months, see what we've been kind of up to, and also kind of think a little bit ahead as well and see what's on the horizon a little bit too, because hopefully there's a little bit of glimmer of light in there somewhere, and hopefully it's kind of starting to look a bit better. So first off, how have you guys got on surviving yet another lockdown? What's helped you guys get through it and kind of made you survive it? So Hilary, what have you been up to and how have you survived the lockdown this time?
I think this time January I read. And
Fantastic.
then from February onwards, it's been rugby and finally Line of Duty's back.
Do you know I haven't caught the new season of Line of Duty yet, so I'll need to try and catch up with that one too.
Catch up.
I haven't watched any of it. I was just going to say I've not watched any of the Line of Duty, so I'm like completely behind the curve with this. And now I'm like, is it 6 seasons in? Am I too late, or should I really be embracing this? You know, is it worth it?
Embrace it, but you have to go to season 1 and start there. That's not one of these ones you can jump in later on. It's like that good set of novels where you have to start at the beginning.
It's definitely. I think it's definitely worth going back to and revisiting, because it's one of the kind of few shows that I was a bit late kind of to it as well, and whenever I was kind of like, I don't know if it's really my thing, but actually it was really, really good and really caught my attention. So definitely, Alison, in your spare minutes, which I know there's not a lot of, definitely worth getting a little look in at that. So that's good.
It's always time for a box set, I suppose, which brings you, doesn't it, to kind of what have you been doing? Binging on Netflix, I think, has been getting us through it, hasn't it? And Call My Agent, if you've not watched Call My Agent on Netflix, you have to watch that. It's very funny, and it's French, and it's about agents and their 10%, and every week there's like a French movie star in it, and okay, not all of them are familiar to us necessarily, but some of them are global stars as well, and it's really, really cool. I've really quite enjoyed that, and obviously, like Hilary, I've been doing a lot of reading, but that's kind of like the obligatory librarian answer, I think, isn't it? Which is a bit sad.
We do sometimes do other things other than just read, though.
Other than just read, I know. We listen to podcasts about books, or actually, that's true. Podcasts have been a big thing that's got me through. I think things like Newscast, which is a great podcast and gives you loads of information about everything. And Adam Fleming, the host, is really cool, I think, and really enthusiastic about everything and funny, which I think helps because there really is not that much to laugh about at the moment. I like Simon Mayo Books of the Year podcast, which is really good as well, because it's a spin-off from when he used to do the Drive Time show on Radio 2, and obviously he doesn't do that anymore, and him and Matt the Sports Guy do a books podcast, and not only did they talk to an author about the book that they've done, but then they do like a quick Q&A about the best book you've ever read, and books that moved you, books from your child, so every author does that, so you find out kind of a bit more about them, and it's a really cool one. So if you've not listened to that already, and then my kind of, I don't think it's a guilty pleasure because I'm not actually guilty about it, but I like to listen to the Fortunately podcast as well, which is with Jane Garvey and Fee Glover, who are two broadcasters from Radio 4, and they just basically have a chat, and they have a guest, and they have a chat to that guest, and people write in, and I suppose it is aimed at, well, they would deny this, it probably is aimed at women, if not, maybe not menopausal, but 40s, 50s, I guess it's that kind of demographic. But people write in all the time and go, I'm really sorry, but I'm a man, or I'm really sorry, but I'm only in my 20s. So I think that, it probably has something for everybody if you just like a bit of a giggle or talking about the really stupid things that happen. So these are some of the things that obviously I think are helping me get through it. But I must admit that this time around, and I don't know whether it's just because you've become completely used to lockdown, but we just sort of went back into our bubble and your walks and doing your work and doing your schoolwork, and just and it's been okay this time, I think. I don't know what you felt, Chris.
I think you're right. I think that it has just become a bit of a normal existence, really, for a lot of us. And so, although we've kind of came in and out of like full lockdown, we've still obviously been in some kind of like restriction in some way throughout the whole entire time. So it's kind of, I don't really kind of think things have changed too much for this time. But yeah, it's been interesting, and I think as you guys know, I've got a little boy, and getting to spend a lot more time with him has definitely been what has kind of been a big thing getting through for me. So that's been fantastic, and getting to read lots of children's books with him, which have been another fantastic, another little librarian thing, I suppose. But yeah, there you go. But yeah, so and obviously, moving on a little bit, our libraries have obviously been closed because of all the restrictions, but we haven't went completely into hibernation. We have been doing other things while we have kind of been closed. So what are some of the highlights from some of the activities and things like that we have been doing, just so that in case any of the listeners have missed anything, and to kind of show that we have still been there and kind of on the front line for everyone. So Hilary, what have the big things that you've noticed that have kind of kept going?
From my side of it, a little bit. We did a little bit of work around International Women's Day back earlier. I was going to say this month, but I guess last month. See, that's a lockdown effect. I don't know what day or week or month it is.
You do lose track.
Completely. So back for International Women's Day, which was the 8th of March or thereabouts, we pulled together some online resources, which was great fun, sort of researching that and listening to some TED Talks to pick out for it. We ended up sort of highlighting the woman who had been the first female president of an African nation. She was head of Liberia for a while, and she's gone on to talk about how people got involved, the women particularly got involved in rebuilding the country, and then go into gender equality stuff. So it all kind of has tied into a lot of things that were going on around that time as well. So yeah, that was, as well as working on some other things in the background for things that are to come. I suppose that's the one that has sort of kept me the last wee while, keeping bits and pieces up front that people have been able to participate in and see. And we'll maybe come back to some of the things that are coming later that I've been working on as well.
Yeah, one of the things from the International Women's Day stuff that we've collated that I really found interesting was the ancestry video that we've got up on the website at the moment too, because I recently have done the ancestry DNA thing, so I'm in complete and utter like geek mode when it comes to anything to do with ancestry at the moment. And so that and I saw that video that you sent through for to put up, and I was like, oh, I'm going to actually watch this, and it was really interesting. And it was obviously it's kind of about sort of researching kind of sort of females in your history, and how just actually by including their maiden name is the main way how to try and help find that, which actually kind of seems an obvious thing, but actually whenever you do start looking at some of the ancestry, you think so many people forget to do it and actually just have their married name in there, and it does make it so much more difficult to kind of just track that sort of ancestry back. So,
and it's one of these things you don't actually think about, because actually it can actually help find the men.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Particularly if it's a child who's maybe his father's maybe not recorded in the birth certificate.
Yeah.
Then actually being able to work through the mum's maiden name can actually be quite helpful. Or even just sort of associating people into the right family as well, because there was that sort of tradition that used to get, a sort of female family name as your middle name as well, that helped out a wee bit as well. So yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Maybe it doesn't help out though if everybody's got the same name, so there's like generations of, matching.
Yeah.
Wee Mary, Big Mary, Old Mary, Young Mary, and so all just goes.
I have so many Henrys going back in my grandmother's side, and they have all the same name, and they're all like kind of just one generation apart, and it actually becomes quite complicated to try to figure out which one's who whenever you find a record about it. So yeah, that does definitely add to the difficulty too. And sticking on the International Women's theme though a little bit, Alison, you also did help contribute to that as well, because it was your idea to come up with one of the podcast episodes a few episodes back, and kind of where we created the sort of favourite authors and favourite female characters and things like that as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And it came together quite nicely, I think, because people came at it from all different angles. And certainly for me, I kind of came away from it with books that I hadn't read or authors that I didn't, you were aware of, the name, but you haven't maybe read their back catalogues. I mean, I think that was quite nice. Although it's really generous of me to say come up with the idea, because really what I thought is that's a lot easier to piece together one than to sit and have this free-form discussion with you. So the selfish part of me was like, that's fine, let's just do it that way. But absolutely, it was all about the women's liberation, and that was really where I was coming from.
Yeah, so. No, I think it was a great way of trying, just kind of getting lots and lots of different perspectives on one podcast, and it was sort of it definitely worked, I think, and hopefully the listeners kind of got something out of that and discovered some great authors and some great characters out of that too. So hopefully it did. Some of the other things that we did kind of touch on a little bit during the time as well, probably the biggest thing I think that we did was the kind of Love Life Week, where Alison, you were involved in that with a couple of events and that as well. Yeah. And we also launched Readwell NL as well that week, which we kind of focused on last episode of the podcast. I think, am I right in thinking, Alison, you did the shared reading for that
one? Yeah. Well, absolutely. And the shared reading is one of those things that we were doing, or my colleague was doing in real life before lockdown. And it's one of the things we've tried to take on to the virtual platform and get people to come along. And if you've not been along to one, it's quite nice. We just read a short story and a poem. I think that Love Life, Love Libraries was round about Valentine's Day. So we had done a kind of romantic theme, but it was kind of nice. It was all about love at first sight. And the ladies that came along, we actually had pretty a good chat actually, and it was quite nice. It opened up all kinds of things about people's personal experiences, about marriage and about being younger, and it was just, and it's the joy of it, I think when you start to read these stories and you're just you just have to turn up and we read the story aloud, and who doesn't, even as an adult still. I think having things read aloud to them, I think it's really, that in itself is a really nice part of the process, and then it just widens to this broader conversation. And because, as I say, it was about love, it just really broadened out a whole conversation about everybody's life experiences, but in a really positive way. And I think especially then in February, which was probably at kind of maybe the height of the lockdown, when the days are still pretty short and dark and the weather's not great, and especially because for that particular event, it probably was a slightly older client group that came along. So when it's icy and snowy, they weren't getting out so much. So the whole thing, I think, it just totally tackled that sense of social isolation that people have, and the kind of empathy and the emotions that just reading a story together or a poem, even if you're not a poetry lover, you're not expecting somebody to come along and give you all their, this is an iambic pentameter and it's this, that, and the next thing. It's about an emotional response to the literature. And I think that was what it's a joy to see people that think, poetry is something I've left behind me at school and I'm not interested in it because it was, at school you were forced to analyse it to death and take it apart, and it kind of takes the pleasure out of it. And it's not, when you do the shared reading, it's not about that. It's about what speaks to you. It's about the bits that jump out, and there isn't right and wrong answers, because, nobody's a literary critic. We're just there to share experiences and to share what really good fiction can sometimes just give you, so I think it was a worthwhile event, and hopefully more people will come along to them, because I think it's one of those things that we're putting out there for people, and absolutely folk are coming along, but the scope is that so many more people will come along to it and really get something from it. And maybe if people are listening to this and they say, I've seen that event, I didn't really know what shared reading meant, and obviously you can come along and join in as much or as little as you like. So it would be really cool if maybe having spoken about it a wee bit more today, that some of the people that listen to the podcast think, next time I might just give that a go.
It would be fantastic if we could to widen the audience a little bit for that as well, and because it is such a worthwhile event, and I think that people do, once they experience it, do kind of get much more out of it than they probably thought they would. And so it's definitely something that would be fantastic for anyone watching for our future events to kind of get involved in as well. Also, some of the other big things that we've kind of got up and running as well again is the good old favourite book bug is back online as well. I know people don't need to hear me singing. I don't know about your two singing voices are like, but I think we'll leave that in the capable hands of Gillian and Sarah that do our book blog videos at the moment. But as always, they are very, very popular, and another fantastic little kind of event and activity we've got running regularly online as well. I think we're kind of not leaving our plan in at that though. I think we've got lots of other little bits and bobs in the plan and still kind of and coming up in the future, haven't we, Hilary? I know that you touched on it a wee bit earlier on. We've got a few other things in the fires, kind of coming up with stuff.
Yeah, so the week of the 19th of April, that week, we've got something called Think Learn Libraries, which we've done over the last couple of years, which is just a way of bringing some of the regular activities together, but also some other bits and pieces that just make people sort of stop and think about things other than reading connected with libraries as well. That said, Alison has already offered to do another of these shared reading sessions, so I'm just going to plug it for her.
Okay, fine. Leave me with nothing to say. Why don't you leave me with just...
It's okay. I'm leaving the other one. So we've got that planned in for, I think, Thursday 22nd, hopefully.
Yeah.
So if like me, you've suddenly realised that actually it's not as fearful as it sounds, then that's the time to kind of put aside for it. And look, Chris, also you're saying about the family history stuff. One of my colleagues, Liz, who's the Open Learning Officer in Wishaw, is an absolute whiz when it comes to family history. So she's going to do a little bit on that week. So that's always worth sort of just dipping into it. And like that, you can be working away on your own on your family history, quite the thing. But sometimes just having a wee bit of a blather with other people who are working on it as well can just give you an odd steer, an odd hint of somewhere else to kind of go and look.
Yeah.
And I suppose while we're doing that, our colleagues in local studies in the museum section have got some fabulous stuff on their website as well, which again you can find under the International Women's Day, because we had linked into some of that. And there's some great things there if your family is from the kind of North Lanarkshire area that you might find interesting. So yeah, we've got a couple of quizzes planned, and I think both you and Alison have got some other bits and pieces to add into that event as well.
Yeah, I will always take an opportunity to plug BorrowBox to anyone. So I'll be producing some sort of video content about kind of a little bit about BorrowBox, kind of how you can use it and things like that sort of stuff, and what kind of all the sort of benefits that you kind of get from that. So that's in the works as well. And I think Alison's other event, other than shared reading one, sounds very, very interesting because
please don't big it up too much. People are going to be sorely disappointed.
I don't think so. I don't think. Which, of course, it's a fake news workshop, and obviously, fake news has been the buzzword for I don't know what the last like 4 or 5 years on any kind of usual kind of news or political type thing or anything like that. So it's
I had a complete. When I was like thinking, will I still call it fake news? Because obviously now in this post-Trump world that we live in, and it's so associated with that, and obviously when I started to do these kind of workshops, it was very politically based. But actually, I think this time, and hopefully if it all comes together at this time, we're going to kind of look at disinformation and misinformation, and particularly around about COVID and vaccinations and that kind of thing. So normally when I kind of run these workshops, it's probably more about politics, and this time I think it's probably going to be more health-based, but a lot of the same principles apply. It's about determining what good information is, verifying your sites, and trying to, we're all kind of guilty of it. In fact, even us as information professionals, in inverted commas, are guilty of it because, like the story about your child can go to Asda, and if an adult buys a meal, for the child can get a free hot or cold meal if an adult spends £1 in Asda in their restaurants, right? Now, I thought this was just one of these silly Facebook myths, but apparently it is actually part of what they're doing with their corporate responsibility and things have been tweeted. But of course, because I think you can go either way, isn't it? That you can believe everything that you read on Facebook, or you become such a cynic that you just think, oh, that's just like a nonsense story. So we're all of us not immune to this. So it's about finding out, the truth of something, about where the good places are to go and seek information, and that maybe using Facebook as a search engine is not perhaps the best way to get the most reliable sources of information, so it's stuff like that I think we're going to touch around. And I mean, obviously, again, depending on how many people come along, but there's obviously going to be opportunities for interaction and discussion and debate and things like that. It's not going to be, you know, a big learned, this is how you cite your sources kind of thing, but it's just about how we all access information and being aware of the lot of misinformation that there is out there, and about not being swayed by that, or not just taking everything at face value, but obviously also not going the full cynic way of disbelieving things because if it sounds too good to be true, it must be too good to be true. So that's my mistake. But you know, there's the two sides to the coin, isn't there? So that's kind of what we're hopefully going to look at in that in a couple of weeks' time.
And I think that sounds like a fantastic event. I think, Alison, you're selling yourself short by saying don't big it up.
See how it all comes together.
Yeah, I think it sounds fantastic. And although I think the fake news word or phrase does have that kind of link back to kind of the Trump president era, I do think it's still going to be a kind of a phrase that will be used going forward, and like say the misinformation and things like that, and it has kind of evolved from that kind of political thing into that sort of COVID misinformation sort of side of things as well. So it's definitely kind of another event that we're worth looking at. So do keep an eye out on our website and our social media accounts as well for all our future events that are coming up, and we'll confirm everything, dates and how to sign up for them and stuff like that on there.
And what I should, I should probably add, because obviously Hilary and I are here, and you're here, and we've bigged up the stuff that we're doing. I know Hilary mentioned in passing the quizzes, but the quizzes are always a massive attractor. That my colleagues Drew and Judy from Airdrie are running a new tricks quiz. They've got a massive real life following who come to those quizzes, and quite a lot of them like to come to the online version. So obviously they're not here this afternoon, but the quiz is also, and it's a really fun afternoon. I know people might have slight quiz fatigue, because in this kind of like Zoom gathering atmosphere that we live in at the moment, possibly there's just been too many quizzes over the last year. But this is a good quiz and it's good fun, and if people, that's another one I think to flag up.
Definitely, and everybody likes the bragging rights of having won a quiz, let's face it. Who doesn't like to say that they were the winner of a quiz? So definitely get signed up to all the events whenever we do announce them officially on the website and things. All information will be on there at one point to how to sign up for them, and we'd love to see you at all the events and stuff. So that's fantastic. Now, getting back a little bit to kind of more sort of book related topics and things. It has obviously been a very disturbed year this year for libraries, and some might wonder about how libraries will cope with that in terms of their stock, and because obviously a lot of the libraries have been closed. Have we kind of missed out on a year's worth of books, or have we somehow managed to kind of capture at least the kind of big releases over that time? What's been happening to kind of help with that, Alison?
Yeah, I don't think we've really missed out as such. I mean, there was this really weird period last year where there was almost like a hiatus and hardly anything was being published. And what we normally do is we order books every week, and it's books that are going to be published 2-3 months in advance down the line. So that's kind of how things work for the library. So a lot of the kind of big spring bestsellers were ordered and ready to come, so that when we did open back up in the summer, some of them came in, and that was fine. And also that's just been an ongoing process. There was this pause point from the point of view of publishers, but then obviously as the world started to open up again over the summer, it was unpaused, and a lot of things that maybe had been postponed came back, and we kind of caught up with that. So if you've been hanging out for your latest Danielle Steele or James Patterson or whatever, then they're there. Obviously at the moment, because of the restrictions, even when we do open up, the request service isn't there. So in terms of the upside is if you happen to hit the library at the right time and the latest James Patterson is there, you're going to get that, rather than it touches the ground in Coatbridge or wherever, and then it goes a tour of North Lanarkshire and you're waiting 3 months to get that book. So there are kind of upsides to it, actually. I think if you're just a regular library person and you're there at the right time, probably there are the kind of upsides, but the books are there definitely. So all these kind of big ticket stuff are there. And then obviously we kind of have taken a step back from that, and towards the end of last year, I suppose, and into this year, when things became clearer really about our finances, because like everybody else, it's all been a bit up in the air. We've been doing a bit of a catch up and a bit of a bulk buy, so there shouldn't really be too much that's slipped through the net. So that's where people can be reassured. Hopefully, I know in Coatbridge, for when my staff go back, there are literally boxes and boxes of new books there ready to be opened and put on the shelf. So in those first couple of weeks especially, there's a bumper crop there for people to come in and borrow, and hopefully appealing to everybody. So as well as obviously the popular big selling things, we've been kind of trying to plug in the gaps, either with bits and pieces of literary fiction or crime, but also with non-fiction as well. And we've been topping up our book group collections. So for those of you that are still coming along to virtual book groups, there's refreshed stock for that, and you maybe can come into the library and borrow a physical book for it. But you're still meeting virtually for the time being, but at least you're obviously there's a wide variety of things that people were able to use from BorrowBox, but it's always nice to supplement that with things that are maybe a wee bit more left field and stuff, because obviously in a book group you're always trying to throw them a curveball, aren't you? And usually the people that come to book groups are often voracious readers, so if you pick something a bit too mainstream, and then they'll come along and they're like, oh, I read that ages ago, or even if it's quite new, so that's that kind of thing. So I think we're fairly abreast of things, so people should come with high expectations, I suppose. Not to oversell it, but there's a good chunk of stuff there just waiting to be borrowed, because obviously that's what we're all wanting to do, is to get back and get those great books out to people. And
with that kind of like when we do confirm an opening date for the libraries to reopen and things, that initial period, like you say, it's got, although the reserves aren't there, it does have the bonus of the fact that you might be able to kind of skip the queue, if it were, as it were, if you come regularly enough and kind of catch the kind of top titles kind of just sitting on the shelves, which normally wouldn't necessarily be there, because they would be doing a bit of a tour of North Lanarkshire for the first 6 months of their life, and until they get back on the shelves at the library they're supposed to be. So there's definitely kind of upsides if you're a regular visitor over those kind of first initial weeks that whenever we get back.
It's a reward now for loyalty to your local library, that if you're the person that comes in, you get the pick of the cream of the crop.
There you go. Fantastic. And Hilary, what about a kind of learning point of view? Have we managed to keep in touch with our learners and kind of continue that support over the period of lockdown and things like that as well?
Yeah, with some of our learners, I think we have to say, unfortunately for some people, we've not been able to do a great deal of support, although, a phone call with a little bit of help with a phone or a tablet or whatever else has always been available. But we've got quite a lot of learners who are working through qualifications, ECDL qualifications, and a good number of them have government funding and are doing it as part of their retraining, maybe having been made redundant, or COVID has given them sort of time to rethink what they want to do. And we've been able to keep in touch with a lot of those learners, not everybody, but we've been able to keep some people going. So again, a bit like our readers, we've maybe not served everybody, but we've still provided a service and we've still kept something going. So yeah, we've got a good number of learners who are working away, learning new things, keeping in touch with the open learning officers, and keeping us on our toes with new questions as well, as people kind of get used to different pieces of software, and even just something as simple as having a quick chat over Zoom or Teams or something with people, just get them a wee bit more confident using them, so that when they come to do the family meetings or whatever else, they're just that wee bit more comfortable on those with them as well. So yeah, we've done a bit. We've kept that. We've been working on other things as well, but we've kept the learner support going as best we can at the moment.
And I guess there probably would have been a period, probably maybe a bit earlier in the lockdown though, of kind of trying to kind of figure out exactly how you keep that support going and things like that, and what we can offer in terms of learning.
Yeah, and yeah, we were dependent on a few things falling into place, and things with other awarding bodies and things like that, and just finally getting in touch with people and finding out. But again, we've got connections with our colleagues in community learning and development, and so that kind of link has continued, who've been passing people on to us, and we've been helping them out, maybe getting some people online and comfortable using the software and the kit that they do have. So yeah, it's been different, but I think it's like everything in the last year. We've adapted and we've found ways to do it. And when we do open again, like will happen with BookBug and whatnot, that we'll still have some restrictions on the number of PCs and probably the amount of time people can spend on them. So again, the support that we'll be able to do initially will be limited, but as things change, we'll get back to. I hate using the phrase "back to normal" actually, but we'll get back to something like what we did before.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think we do have to kind of. There will still be that kind of adjustment period on every kind of level of our service, but we will kind of work on it, and we will kind of get everything kind of back to something as close, if not exactly the same as what we did have in the past. So it's exciting times, because I think it has also opened opportunities to kind of do things differently, and those things as well can continue as well, because there's some parts of it has opened up new avenues for us to do other things, like you said. So it has been a kind of interesting time. So, but I think we're kind of just about finished. I'll kind of have one last thing to go with these, because I did probably most people who listen to the podcast have over the last few episodes heard everything about what I have read. So they're probably sick to death of hearing about what I've been reading. And I'm a slow reader, so I don't get through as many books as to kind of give.
You have to stop saying that on the podcast.
I know, it's true though. It's true. So I thought I would get to see what you guys have read. I know, Hilary, you emailed recently a kind of nice list of a lot of books that you've been reading recently. So, what has been the standout ones for you in the last little while?
I had, like I said at the beginning, in January, and I've done this several years in a row now. January, I seem to be able to read. Some point in February, I lose it. So I had quite a kind of reading January. One of the ones I really loved is a book by Matt Ford called Politically Homeless. He was a sort of behind the scenes member of the Labour Party and worked on a lot of campaigns for it. Given the situation we find ourselves in right now on the run into a Scottish election, I'm just going to park that one and say, if that's your kind of style of interest, go read it. But I'm not going to walk that tightrope about politics at this point, because I think it was probably asking for too much for me to be too careful here. Couple of other ones though. I finally got round to reading The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse, which I know a lot of people read first lockdown, and it was a sort of therapy that a lot of people found then. It's a beautiful, almost picture book, almost graphic novel, all about kindness and wisdom and philosophy, and it reminds me a lot of, in some ways, of Pooh and Piglet, if that makes any sense to people.
I can see that.
Yeah. So I absolutely loved that. I had bought it as, I'll own up to it because I think I can get away with this now. I had bought it as a Christmas present for somebody and it never got to them.
Christmas present from you to you with love and best wishes.
So it became, yes, exactly, it became my Christmas present to myself. But I can safely say that it's one of these books that will be gifted over and over and over again now to people, because it's just so beautiful. And yeah, I've got a couple of others, but I think I'll let Alison jump in. You two jump in before I sort of run through everything, just in case you want any of the ones I've got here.
You had a kind of epic list. No, I don't want any of the ones that you've got, but you touched on the politics, and what you had read, which I had also read, which touches on the politics, is the Scabby Queen, the Kirsten Ennis book, which is, mine's actually propping up my computer, but Hilary can show you hers, but you can't see it anyway. With the same, to channel the Simon Mayo podcast, they always describe the book at the start of it. It's got a bright pink and orange cover in it. But it kind of, it took the whole story of Cleo right through from her childhood. And this isn't really a spoiler alert, but to her death. But from the poll tax, from the one-hit wonders to, living in London, and it touches on politics kind of right through from sort of the 80s, that kind of the height of things, kind of Scottish Life movement and Thatcherism, but also a lot in it about music and just a lot in it about relationships and people, and like a lot about Scotland actually. And I don't mean I don't read a lot of Scottish fiction, but I don't, because I quite often read novels to escape, and I like to read books that are set in other more exciting places, or or sometimes it's a bit too close to home. And and that's possibly not true for Scabby Queen, but and I know we spoke a lot about Scabby Queen like in Book Week Scotland, and people like our colleague Drew spoke probably much more lyrically about it than I certainly can. But having finally got around to it a bit like Hilary over these last wee while, I would definitely recommend it, and I know that's definitely one we've also got loads of in the library. So if when people do start to be able to come back to the buildings, they can get it.
It's funny, I read probably about 3/4 of it in a day and a half.
Right.
And for whatever reason, I kind of had to put it down at that point. And I was absolutely adoring it at that point. And it took me about 2 or 3 weeks to come back to it afterwards. And I found it a wee bit harder to come back into afterwards. So I really strongly recommend it if you are reading it and you're able to just almost read it straight through. I think that really makes it.
And yet, weirdly, I think I had the opposite response, that I brought it home from work and I started to read it and it wasn't quite grabbing me, and I was probably in the middle of reading something else at home as well at the same time. So I was kind of dipping in and out of it till I was about halfway through, which I wouldn't really recommend because it's quite episodic and you do probably lose the narrative flow if you do that. But when I came back to the second half of it like that, then I was churning through it because I wanted to know what was going to happen next and where it was going to go, because it went off in all kinds of directions that I didn't anticipate it would. And the social critique in it of the politics, but even things about newspaper publishing and stuff, which and how that's changing, it really drew in a whole wide range of themes, but within this one kind of central story. So definitely I think for people, even if it's not necessarily the kind of thing you would usually read, there's probably something in it that speaks to a lot of us, I think, in our experiences. And for a first novel as well, it's like that's it's good. But the other biggie that I did read, actually, I don't know, sorry Chris, if you're wanting to wind up, the other biggie that I did read, and again I was really late to the party for no good reason, was Shuggie Bain. And if I thought that the Scabby Queen kind of like speaks to a lot of things or like hits you in the guts, then Shuggie Bain really hits you in the guts about a lot of things. And again, I started it and it was not close to home because thank God my life experiences didn't really mirror the growing up story of Shuggie. But I mean, obviously it's set in Glasgow and a lot of it's quite local and some of the references are quite local, and certainly the way people speak to one another is bang on in terms of how people in Glasgow speak to one another. It's just like so good. But and although it's quite a hard book to read in places, bits of it are really challenging and emotionally challenging, and although Shuggie himself is a character that kind of comes through it, and it's quite an uplifting story in places, but there are bits of it that just get you, and it's one of those books that you read bits of it and days and weeks after it you're still reflecting on the bit, because I remember reading one bit, and I'll not give you the spoiler alert of it, but I kind of read it and I thought, God, I can't believe this has happened. And you kind of almost go back and you read it again and you go, yeah, that really did happen like that, and it just kind of knocks the feet away from you in places. And I mean, how powerful is that for the writing that it gets you like that, So I don't know if either of you guys have read it yet, but it's so good.
The two books that you've been talking about there, that's the two books that are on my kind of that are burning a hole in my to read list a little bit, because I got them at Christmas time and I've just not got around to reading them yet, but they are definitely kind of on the to read list. So and everybody who has read them, you don't hear a kind of bad review of it. It's always very positive and kind of
it's a hard read, don't get me wrong. It's not the kind of book that you're going to come away and go, oh, I really enjoyed that, because it like hits you between the eyeballs lots and lots of times. So I think that's, I know we've had some discussions with other colleagues about it, and like you can't question the quality of the writing or even the way it's plotted or the dialogue, but it's a hard read in the sense of the themes are quite challenging and emotional. And for you, Chris, with your upcoming happy event, then you might want to get that one in before your brain you're completely sleep deprived. It's not for the faint-hearted.
I do, just for anyone who hasn't caught that reference, I do have a child on the way very, very soon, and my reading did take a big kind of hit whenever my first kid came along. So I don't know, my reading might slump again for a little while after this. But
yeah. The sleep deprivation not sleep deprivation directly, but another book that I've just finished reading was Hungry by Grace Dent, and actually it's probably better suited because I think when you are sleep deprived, these kind of like weighty tomes, which Shuggy Bean is to a certain extent, are not necessarily good when you're getting up 2 and 3 and 4 times during the night. Hungry by Grace Dent is quite episodic and it's quite light, and it's a really warm book, and it is kind of all about her experiences with food all through her life and how almost, she grew up in Carlisle, Grace Dent. She's a restaurant critic and journalist, I suppose, TV presenter. Probably some of you will have seen her in bits and pieces, but she's got a column in The Guardian. And anyway, it kind of charts the things from, she was born I think 73, 74, and things like the opening of the big Asda in Carlisle and the major excitement and the introduction of things like the Whoopsie stickers and going to get the bargains at the end of the day, and her mum just thought this was like the best thing ever. You're probably too young to remember these things being new and exciting, Chris, but this is, in the 80s when supermarkets kind of like morphed from these tiny. Anyway, but it's the kind of book, like the structure of that is quite good, that if you are going through either maybe being a bit sleep deprived or going through emotionally tough times, it's the kind of book that you can pick up and dip in and out of. And because there isn't a strong overarching narrative arc, but yet it's really warm, she makes really funny observations just about her life and the role that food has played at different points in her life, from being a child to being a student to being all the kind of things like that. Then it's really good. I would quite recommend that one as well.
Yeah, one of the ones that stood out to me on your list, Hilary, that whenever I saw it was the J.D. Kirk one, simply because I love the fact that it's a pseudonym for a big Scottish kids author, and he's writing Scottish crime fiction, which is so a completely different kind of like take on it, and they have caught my eyes because of that. And I know you said you kind of indicated that you thought it was quite good, so is it worth a look?
Absolutely, but for you right now, as a dad, maybe don't start with book one.
I'm feeling intrigued now to know what happens in book one.
Book one's called A Litter of Bones, and like that, I had read. So the crime books are published under the author J.D. Kirk. But J.D. Kirk is a Fort William author called Barry Hutchison, who started writing for kids and does a lot of screenwriting as well, and writes for the Beano as well, or did write for the Beano. I don't know if he still does or not. And I, in the former life as a school librarian, I had kind of met him just as he started out, and I loved his writing at that stage. And a series of books about a character called Mr. Mumbles, which are really quite dark children's books. And so I sort of wanted to see if that sort of corresponded over into that instance, and I just love his sense of humour as well. As I said in that conversation we had, it's almost like Taggart meets the Highlands a wee bit, and that sort of is darker than Taggart maybe, but just that sort of dark humour, this sort of police humour, dark humour. Sort of Litter of Bones, it's a DCI who's working, actually at the time he's kind of based in Glasgow, but the case that comes up in Fort William, it seems tied into something that he's worked on before, and it starts with him visiting the person that they got for the original crime in Carstairs, and they then have to start to kind of reevaluate this a wee bit about. He's absolutely convinced he's got the right person the first time, but is that sort of copy? Is it a copycat, or because there's a lot of things that seem just a wee bit too knowledgeable about it?
Right.
And it's also, I mean, I love that part of the world as well. So it's quite refreshing to find something that's a good quick crime read, but set somewhere out of Glasgow. I mean, I this time of year would automatically now be looking for Alan Park's book, because he writes a series of crime novels that are
Yeah.
Like it started with January Blues or something like that, and it was one per month. So this is number 4, so it's due out in April. So it's kind of like, right, where is that? But this is kind of along the same sort of lines, I think, as well. And again, I mean, I read it in a couple of days, which is again not like me too often. I tend to put things back down, but I would thoroughly recommend it. And I think, Alison, I picked up that there's a few of them coming in new stock. I think maybe the first 3 or so. Yeah.
No.
Well, you see, of course, I had to do that of which library do I need to go and visit to be able to be first to
You're going
it.
to the tour of North Lanarkshire, not the books.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I'm not going to be able to wait that long. This is going to be an order. And he actually quite often puts them out on several platforms that are not library based, very cheaply. So if anybody uses those, it's definitely a good one. And enjoy Scottish crime. I think he's hit the bone with this again. But as I say, Chris, I'm going to suggest you leave it maybe a wee while before you read this one.
I will take your advice on board on that and maybe leave it for a little while.
Leave it for a wee bit.
Is there any kind of titles that are coming up that you guys are really looking forward to reading? Kind of just quickly before we wrap up, Alison, what's on your hit list?
I don't know what's on my don't ask me that. I think there's loads of good things coming out, and I think what's quite exciting for us now is that loads of things that came out in hardback during lockdown last year are now coming out in paperback. So things like Hamnet are coming out in paperback, or the Nick Hornby Just Like You that we spoke about. I think again it was Love Life Love Libraries for the Valentine's kind of pick a date with the book. Yeah. These are all starting to come out in paperback, so we're going to get multiple copies of them. The only other book that, and again I think it's just not long out in hardback, it certainly will be new to the libraries, is the William Boyd book Trio, which I've not long finished reading myself, which is quite good, and again set in the 1960s. So I kind of like to get away from, I do read crime, so I don't entirely use novels for escapism, but and I suppose there is some crime inadvertently in this one, but it's kind of set in the late 60s. Some of it's in Paris, some of it's in England, and it's kind of about the shifting social attitudes that have come with that time. It looks at kind of a film producer, writers, actresses, things like that. And it just, again, that's a really good one, and quite evocative of the period and how things are changing, the kind of freer attitudes to alcohol, sex, types of relationships, even how people make a living, or women being independent of husbands and not reliant on them for money and or for security perhaps. So it's quite an interesting look at things, and the usual kind of flair for storytelling through it, pulling it all together. So I would definitely recommend that. That's one of the new ones that's coming in. And so I see Val McDermott got the copy of her newest book the other day on Twitter, so I think that's quite exciting one to look forward to, seeing as we've been talking about a lot of the tartan noir, as it were. Anyway.
Yeah, and Hilary, what about you? Is there anyone that you're kind of looking forward to reading soon?
I'm just finally picking up one that I borrowed just before we locked down, John Marr's The Passengers, which came out, I think, late 2019, so it was just in paperbacks. I think it was just sort of coming in just as all this started. And the idea behind that is that everybody has, by law now, drives driverless cars. And basically somebody's hacked them. And there's 8 people in cars that have been hacked. And it's set them on a collision course. And then it sort of seems to ramp up, so there's a little bit of speed, because if the authorities get involved, then the vehicles are going to explode. And the hacker is trying to get the public as a kind of a jury to decide who lives and who dies from these cars. So it's one that's been sitting there for a wee bit, and I'm finally going to get to from a fiction point of view. And then the other one, again, it's one that came out just tail end of last year. Non-fiction wise, it's by Rutger Bregman, and it's called Humankind: A Hopeful History, and it takes the whole premise of history but from a perspective of, well, if we actually start from the idea that everybody's good, then how does our view of life and events change, and how can if we basically take that approach to things and how can government change and so on. It's one of these hugely thick books that I'll probably take quite a while to get through, but a bit like Homo sapiens and the other one along those lines, which I can't remember the title of quickly, is one of these ones I think is probably worth dipping into. But yeah, I always end up with far too many things waiting to be read and never get round to them. So I'll stop at that.
I think that's the one kind of problem of being a library worker is your to-read list always becomes too long to actually ever reach the end of. I'll show you how much I am in parent land at the moment. The book that I am most excited about coming out in the next little while is The Whale Who Wanted More by Rachel Bright. It's a picture book, and it's part of a series that she does with an illustrator called Jim Field, and they are fantastic books. The pictures in them are amazing, and they always have such lovely meanings in the story, and there's always kind of little kind of hidden gem behind the story, and that's the kind of latest one that's coming out later this month. So I'm really looking forward to getting my hands on that one and reading that to my little one as well before bedtime. So that's I'm in complete parent mode for the next little while, and going to be looking up, getting lost in picture books is where I am at this precise moment in time. So
it's always a good place to be.
Yeah, it is definitely. It's an underrated genre, I think, for adults is children's picture books.
Definitely, yeah. Well, you're kind of preaching to the choir, I think, with this crowd, aren't you, as far as that's concerned?
That's about all we've got time for today, guys. Thank you, Alison and Hilary, for joining me for this episode. It has been fantastic having a wee chat with you about the kind of what's been going on in libraries, what we hope is going to be coming in the future. And I think there's a lot to be looking forward to and lots of hopefulness in the future. We haven't got an exact date yet to announce for the library's reopening, but it should hopefully be coming very, very soon. So do watch out our website and our social media for a definite answer on that. And in the meantime, as always, you can use BorrowBox to get your reading fix. All you have to do is download it and sign in using your library details. If you don't know your password for that, you can get it by going to www.culturenail.co.uk/password request, and we will get that password to you as soon as we possibly can. But that's all we have time for just now. So if you have enjoyed this episode, leave us some feedback using the hashtag FLB podcast, and we'll be back again soon for another episode. But it's bye for me and bye from Alison and Hilary.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.